On this special edition of AV Week, we take a look at the residential part of AV. VIA International is in receivership, what that means for their employees as well as for their customers. Planar has introduced a see-through OLED, and CNET has bought a house strictly for smart home use. All that and more next on an AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
AV Week is brought to you by our fine group of underwriters, companies like the AVNU Alliance. This is an AV Week special residential version. Episode 1, This Old Moose, recorded Monday, November 9th, 2015.
Ready.
AV Week.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AV Week. AV Week. This is a special edition of AV Week. We're going to call it the residential version of AV Week. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us is Mr. Matt D. Scott, London, Ontario, Canada, Omega Audio Video. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Good. Also with us is Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa. From Uncle Richie's wearing glasses and looking pensive. Wow.
I'm going to go for my book cover photo.
I like. I don't want to know what kind of book that is, Rich.
Well, I'm sitting here in the middle. I'm getting. We got caught in a snowstorm or a rainstorm that just started this morning. All of a sudden, a tree came crashing down in front of my house. I just showed Tim the live video, the on the scene video of it. So I'm just glad to be online right now.
It was impressive. A very nice tree.
It was impressive.
So with
it's a big old tree.
It's a very big tree. Also is Julie Jacobson, editor at CE Pro Magazine, and also doing the pensive. Oh my lord, the pensive book cover tour. How are you, ma'am?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good. Got to see Julie at CEDIA. Also got to see our buddy here, Joe Whitaker, at CEDIA as well. How are you, sir?
Doing well, guys. Excited about the first residential effort in this.
Yeah, last time I saw Joe, he was losing or had lost his voice on the
completely
last
by that.
Yeah, last day of CEDIA, Joe was actually on his way to the award ceremony, and he's like, "I can't talk," but yeah.
Good impersonation.
Well, yeah, it was a horrible impersonation, but thank you for being nice. First up here, and if you've never watched AV Week or whatever, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a little bit different here. We're going to focus on the residential market. So there will probably be a whole lot of fiber talk in the next few minutes, unless we come up with something. I couldn't think of another commercial centric thing. So first up, this is something that broke during CEDIA. Actually, it's VIA International. Well, they closed their doors. What was it, Rich? The day of CEDIA or the day before CEDIA?
I want to say Julie actually was
hot
on the story.
It was the day of, and I was eager to get the story up, so I had to cancel my morning appointments on the day of the show.
Wow. Well, there you go. So the day of CEDIA.
We were getting all kinds of phone calls coming in, and everybody was calling in with scoops. I know. It was an interesting news day.
Scoops and tweets of support. That was the one thing that was kind of cool, right? It was, here you've got this relatively, it was a great effort. It was a big company. We all had friends that worked inside the big conglomerate VIA International. So there was also tweets of support, right? These people had honestly lost their jobs. And one of the things that Rich and I had talked about just kind of off the air and on the show floor was, holy crap, you've got people who've lost their jobs here. You have clients who are in the middle of, possibly right in the smack dab in the middle of projects, who are going to be not put in the best situation here, right? So how do we fix this, right? How do we come up with this? And one of the things, and the story is from Julie's CEPro.com. They've got a receiver, right? So they're going through the bankruptcy process. They have a receiver. Some of the things, and Julie, we'll start with you on this. You write in here that the court appointed receiver is Cords and Company or Codesco. According to your sources, what exactly are they supposed to do, and what are they going to do, I guess?
Well, I've tried to contact them on many occasions, and they haven't been responsive. What the receiver does is looks at all the assets, looks at all the contracts between VIA and their contractors, their customers, their employees, and determine how best to divvy up the available funds. So you're, supposed to petition them if you feel like you're owed something. So the question really is, and it's when the news broke, it was sort of half support and half I told you so. And there's just no room in our industry for I told you so's. Most new initiatives fail; they just do. And we all should be thankful that other people are taking those risks so we can learn from them. So there's just no room for that kind of cruelty. We should be thankful that they tried this roll up. So some of the questions are, and we had this discussion a long time ago about who owns the code, and this controversy about some dealers maintaining that they own the codes to any given project. So if another dealer wants to take over a project, they can't because the original programmer owns that code. But what this really opens our eyes to is the fact that even if your policy is that the customer owns the code once they're paid for, and this was VIA's policy, the problem is when your doors are shut overnight, the bank comes in and takes all your computers, may shut down your cloud access to any code, so you physically can't get your hands on it. And so, I'm not quite sure what the status is. I've talked to some technicians who say they have the programs on their computers and they'll happily part with it for any customer that asks. But if it's tied up in the receivership, what happens?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. And Rich, will bring you on this one because this is, again, something you and I talked about kind of off the air. What do we do as professionals in this industry, trying to make right, trying to make sure that customers and clients don't have a bad taste in their mouth about other, integrators or other digital concierges? Is this something where I'm going to suggest something, kind of 10,000 feet away that has no impact on me personally, but is this something where you kind of go in and you either do it for a loss or you do it for cost and say, what, to kind of get your business, you go in and fix the mess?
Well, this happened at our largest industry conference, and I think Joe will agree that, and we all would agree that what happened isn't good for the industry in general. It's the residential integrator doesn't always have the best reputation going in the first place. And so when something like this comes up, like Julie was saying, there's really no room right now from a kind of a triage standpoint of the industry to say, I told you so, I knew that they were going to go down, because it's still going to affect you because you are still in this industry. And we've seen that several of the manufacturers and the vendors and the major vendors have jumped in and said, no, we want to find a way to make this work. I believe that CEDIA has had some discussions just as the association on how we can restore some of the client confidence that's occurred because of this. I know that there are several integrators regionally that are trying to find ways to not gouge a client, not rub salt into the wound, but at the same time say, look, I wasn't the person who caused this. I'm going to try to help. I'm not going to necessarily charge a premium for it, but let's find a way to make this work. And again, the problem is that it's not that VIA just kind of quietly went into the good night. It just woke up Monday morning and doors are closed. That was it. So it was sudden and it was abrupt, and a lot of people were sitting there going, what do I do? And I've spoken to a couple of people, and I think across the board, everybody's trying to find a way to make things right, whether they're directly involved or not, because long term, from an industry standpoint, we need to make sure that we can recover from this, and we can give the consumer confidence that hopefully, that it can't happen again.
All right, Joe. Here, I'll give you the hard question. How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? I mean, let's be honest here. Julie makes a really good point. Thank God that people are willing to put their necks on the line and do things that are inventive and do things that are pushing the envelope. And yeah, you know what? Sometimes they're going to fail. I get that. But that's what makes kind of the business part of this interesting and fun and exciting. But, I guess from the client standpoint and from the worker standpoint, how do we make sure that something like this, where you wake up one morning and suddenly realize that the integrator that you thought was going to put in the home system in your multi-million-dollar home isn't around anymore?
Well, it's funny, since this happened, there was an immediate sense of urgency and a lot of conversations going on within the CEDIA board, with Vin as the new CEO. The timing of him being there was amazing. And just a lot of really strange things going on. It opened up some old wounds, started some new ones. And one of the interesting things is how everybody kind of within CEDIA came together, because it reminded a couple of us of the first initial close down of Colorado VNet, the first time when they chained the doors shut. And at the time, I was a VNet dealer, and I was like, where are my touchscreens, guys? And I couldn't even get anybody on the phone. And these things happen sometimes, but it's interesting the way CEDIA and the organization kind of came together. Haggai Feiner from Access Networks, Terrence Murray, these people actually contacted some of the VIA people out there, hired on some of the staff to put them back working. Internally, we've been doing a lot of phone calls, trying to place these guys, get them back up, because the initial, what everybody said was, these guys have lost 401k, insurance, everything was gone. And of course, that is still, like Julie said, that has more to do with the receivership than anything. A lot of people don't understand the way that works in a business sense, that they may still get some of that, but that's not going to be clear until these guys are finished. And all the money might be gone before that. And the I told you so people, yes, the writing was on the wall. You saw Randy make a move. Mark Hodges was in my early days in the board, was a board member, and he was involved in VIA. And it was kind of, you could see it coming, but you saw some of the people preparing for it. You're already seeing some of the VIA companies go back out and actually start back up on their own as the original companies, which is great that they can do that. I don't know how the VIA thing's going to hold back, but the industry as a whole coming together, and certain things we're seeing now. Julie brought up the who owns the code thing. And I know a couple of the VIA companies, back their stuff up on cloud servers that were paid for by VIA. So that means receivership owns those right now. Yeah. But you see companies like Crestron, Control4, Savant now using their own private clouds owned by like Control4, where the code is stored. So if you change dealerships somewhere in the midst, or a VIA thing happens, it's still there. It's still available. It's the customers. It's owned by them. It got no light during CEDIA, but I loved what Control4 did of putting the stuff on the cloud and associating it with that customer or that client's account.
Yeah.
So they truly do own that. But the industry coming together as a whole, I think, is probably one of the most important things I've seen, because VIA was so big. It influenced so many people, so many projects, so many employees, so much money for people like Julie to put the word out there. Haggai and Terrence and Vin, pulling things together to try to help these people, because it was huge. It was a blow, letting everybody know that, you can't be Best Buy and Magnolia. Yeah. When we're these integration companies and we're ingrained in people's lives, more so than a plumber and electrician. So at the end of the day, everybody is hurt by it. But all these people are coming together to try to remedy the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to be clear, you were talking when it comes to Crestron and those the cloud service for that is just the ping, right? That's not
right. Yeah. To be clear, that is just that. Hopefully, it spreads out a little more and touches some more. But evidence of situations like this, I hope is going to be a big proponent for these manufacturers to take note of that and actually have the code owned by the customer in some form or fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, from your standpoint, obviously you've got a little bit different situation. The fact that London, Ontario is, I'm not even sure if you're a suburb of anybody really. I guess Detroit.
No, don't put
I
those
don't.
two together. Come on.
I've told you before. I'm a big dumb American, man. I barely understand where Missouri is.
2 hours from Detroit.
Okay, and you're 2 hours from Toronto. There you go. You're halfway between the two. You're fine.
Exactly. Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. So from your standpoint, again, you were with us when we all got the word that this happened. Kind of the same question that we asked, Joe and Richie. How do we make sure that this doesn't impact the industry, as a whole?
I don't know how much we can control that. I think the hard thing that our industry always comes up against is that you do have these issues, and for some reason we seem to be within the industry held to a higher standard than you would an electrician or a plumber, just as Joe pointed out. There's something to be, excuse me, there's something to be said for, the fact that in these situations, and I really don't want to get into the coding discussion per se, but that's what it kind of does come down to. These clients do not want to be held responsible with, at times, multi-million-dollar systems that may not be able to function because their supplier went down. I think it raises a good point that we as owners, and I'm an owner myself, and Joe's an owner, and Rich is an owner, that we need to do everything in our power to not only protect ourselves from a business standpoint, but to protect our clients. They've put a lot of faith in us and in our companies to do a lot of really cool stuff for them. But if we haven't done our due diligence to make sure that in the event of catastrophic failure of our company, that our clients aren't all going to be stuck with, non-functioning systems and massive investments that don't work or aren't serviceable, that's bad business on our part. And, I think it's just something where we need to do everything we can to put all of our clients at ease and show that we're not just in it to make money for us and to be profitable, but we're in it to take care of them in every facet, in every way.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, moving on here. CNET. The story comes to us from CNET.com. They bought a house, and not that there's anything special about the fact that they bought a house, but they bought a house.
They bought a big house.
They bought a very nice house.
They bought a big house.
Yeah. Well, here let's bring up the video just so we can see the whole thing. It's a nice house. It's a big house. The whole point of the house is so they can, as they put it, do a blank slate when it comes to smart homes. So, Uncle Richie, we're going to start with you, simply since CNET's in your backyard. The whole thing here, and some of these pictures are not doing it properly, so I'm just going to say screw it. This house, we talked a little bit out the air, the fact that our buddy Josh Schrago, who lives 2 minutes from you, has gone to the Target store, or Target house, I guess that's the Target display in San Francisco, where they have all the smart home things. I think so. That's Uncle Richie's. Yeah.
Going nuts.
So where are we at when it comes to the quote unquote the smart home thing?
Sorry, of course
That's all right.
Of course, this is when the public work shows up and the cop starts barking. Again, I'm a huge fan of it. I think that anything that increases exposure is going to help. And I constantly talk to Len Blue in the face about it, but I think that IoT is starting to hit. They're starting to hit the beachfronts at this point. And I think that the big problem that we have still from the CI market is that we constantly are trying to stick with what we got for whatever reason that we justify it. And we aren't necessarily embracing the larger markets. And I think things that CNET jumping in on it. I think that Target jumping in on it. I think these companies jumping in on it, it's the rising tide raises all ships. I truly believe in that, there's going to be opportunities there that weren't there before when we are trying to push it solely from our side. Is there going to be issues with education and confusion and the consumer? I think, we were off air, and that was one of the things that we'd mentioned was, the consumer confusion that's going to occur initially. And that's just because it's being overwhelmed with all of these different products coming in. I think that's a reason why the CI market is going to grow from it, because we are going to need more people who are technologists, not necessarily AV guys, not necessarily video guys, not necessarily touch panel or control guys, but true technologists who are coming in and saying, I'm here to guide you through this process. There's value for it. There's a value add proposition, but it's going to cause completely different business models from what we've seen over the past 25 years.
All right, Matt. So here's something that not a whole lot of people know about Matt. Matt is a regular guest on a local Canadian radio station as their technologist, basically, trying to explain everything from why BlackBerry still sucks and is a horrible thing, to...
Do you have radio in Canada?
They do have. They have one radio station. It's
You
called,
wind it up, though.
They wind it up.
It's like no phones.
It's WCAN. W because it's most of Canada is east of the Mississippi. That's a bad radio joke. Anyhow.
Yeah, it's really bad, but good try.
Yeah, good try. So anyhow, as you're explaining this to the people interviewing you and over the airways, but also to your clients and customers, how do you do exactly what Rich was talking about, and that's educating folks when they're going to Best Buy and Target and seeing all these things?
Well, we don't have Target anymore because of some bad business decisions by them. But notwithstanding, it's really become a large part of our business. And we used to be in that moment where you'd walk in, you meet with a client, and you'd instantly start talking TVs and sound. And that was, kind of where it started and a lot of times where it ended. Now it's becoming more of a all-encompassing conversation about how they use technology in general. And, whether that be thermostats, lighting, iPhones, music, everything. You really have to kick off that conversation just talking about what you do digitally in your house and in your life. And, most people get very confused because there are so many options out there. And it's up to us as integrators, as technology integrators, to come across and really help them I hate to say understand what they want, but really just let them talk. Let them explain to you how they go through a day, what they want to do, what bothers them. And that gives you the opportunity to open those doors and talk about things like lighting control and T-Stat control. Gosh, we're having a T-Stat control on our personal Slack communications right now, talking with one of the guys, and and that's a perfect example. The gentleman who's asking us, he's in our industry, but he doesn't seem to know anything about thermostats, which isn't bad because it's giving us an opportunity to explain to him the features and benefits of a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. And most consumers kind of know that this stuff exists, but not everybody understands the practical applications of how they work in their lives. The only other thing I'll say, and this is kind of one of my concerns with the general basis, and I know Julie's written about this a couple of times. I also read an article on This Old House that was talking about the top 5 technology devices you need in your house. And they were, from our standpoint and our industry standpoint, they were mediocre at best. And it's good because it gets people talking about it, but it's up to us to show people solutions that actually work, and more importantly, that work together.
All right. Mr. Joe, from your standpoint, you mentioned the fact that we can't be Magnolia, we can't be all those things, but these are where our client, these are where your clients are going, right? That's where they're seeing things a lot of times for the first time. We all were at CEDIA. We saw some really great imaginative things. Your clients, unless you bring them to them, are not going to see those for a while out in the wild, unless you're like our buddy Steven from Georgia, who calls his people from the freaking show floor of CEDIA. I just saw the most amazing thing. You have to buy this, and he sells like 10 of them.
10 of them.
He sells 10 of them.
Unfortunately, I do that too.
But that's the amazing thing about you guys is you do that. Like
Southern thing.
It must be a Southern thing, yeah. South of the Mason-Dixon line. So how do you? I mean, same thing. Question to you though is how do you take what they're going to see in the wild and explain to them how they can integrate it in their space?
Well, my approach as of the last some years has been a little different, and I love the fact that this year at CEDIA, they kind of coined that the new phrase "life lived best at home," and that's kind of the thing that pretty much everybody has touched on. Matt has touched on. Everybody has is the bringing together of all the devices and the things that they do see in the wild. Yeah, they're consumer devices, but oftentimes I'll invite potential clients or clients over to my house and give them exactly what they're going to see in the wild. You walk into my house, you see a Nest thermostat on the wall. In the kitchen, I threw up some GE Link lights just so they could see the difference between that and what we typically provide. Use Philips Hue for under cabinet lights, and really kind of dragged everything together and showed them that some of these consumer devices, guess what? On my home control app, I can still control these, because these are things they're seeing out in the wild. But the thing is to be able to show the difference, to actually let them know and feel that there is a difference between these two. If you go ahead and buy a whole bunch of Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever, Target stuff, and you hit all off and you get the popcorn effect that we all know what that is, but they don't know until they see it that why didn't that one turn off at the same time as that one, and that breezeway took 5 minutes longer? Well, because there is a difference between the consumer stuff and the residential stuff. I mean, the pro stuff. And I really hope that CNET touches on that when they start doing this inside this house. To me, I'll give them a lot of credit if they invite all 5 of us over to the house to stay a weekend so we can really see it for ourselves and say, you know what, this is the right house to be able to do this in.
Yeah.
This is going to work. Because, a lot of times what they're probably going to do, it'll be your average CNET stuff, and they'll show some Philips and some GE and whatever Wink becomes and Lowe's new Iris Hub, and they'll forget about the market where the actual stuff from IoT is coming together. Because that's the thing. I just read an article I saw on LinkedIn this morning. I cannot remember who wrote it, but it was interesting how they were talking about IoT, and the biggest question is my TV one of those things? Well, we know, yes, it is. It is. It's connected. It's got apps now. But nobody is really proposing yet the put together of all these, consumer and pro, because it's going to happen. I'm sure Matt has had some systems where there's a couple of things that they could buy at Best Buy or whatever. That's a bad one. At Home Depot, a Nest thermostat or something that is considered consumer facing. But we as integrators and technologists, like Richard said, I love that word, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to start using that. We need to figure out a way to incorporate that stuff into our systems because that has a public, open face. So the CNET house, I think, is actually going to be good for us if we can mimic some of the stuff that they are doing.
And I would agree with that. I do hope that they, I don't know, we've had a couple of people from CNET on before. On AVWeek and some other shows. I really hope that they grasp some of these, not just the commercial. I mean, I'm not just talking about AMX and Crestron. I'm talking about Control 4 and Claire controls and some of these other ones that they may not think of right off the top of their head because you're right. They are thinking more along the lines of what you can get at Lowe's and Home Depot and the other ones. So
the timing is crazy, though. I'm willing to bet that we're going to see the new Savant remote in that house.
Oh, absolutely.
Within the next 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. and right, Matt's right. We should see it there, right?
That's the whole thing that so often these major publications seem to forget is that yes, show us Philips Hues, show us all of that stuff, but also keep in mind that there is a whole level of products available on the market from integrators and not from integrators. Heck, there's stuff you can buy on Amazon that is good quality stuff that it's designed to work with everything. And so often they forget these things in these situations, and it at times can give our industry a bit of not a black eye per se, but make it look like we're not all there. Because they always go, or seem to always go with just those basic consumer products. So I hope due to the scale of this thing that they actually take more than for example, what Target puts in a home because of what Target sells. I hope they go over and above and show both sides of that.
Well, let me ask this, and this is not just to Matt, but to all of you guys. Is it more consumer? Because we've used the different terms, and I want to kind of clarify them. Is it more we're talking about the differences between consumer residential and pro, or are we talking more consumer residential versus DIY? Right.
And that's the key. Is there's a difference between DIY and, say, integrator level.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still have integrator level that is consumer programmable or something like that. For example, Nest, it works out of the box with its own system. It will connect to some of the other products, but it can also be integrated into Control4, RTI, Crestron, whatever, what have you. It's the DIY stuff that sometimes limits things. Yeah. I remember seeing an article in, I think it was one of the major public pubs, maybe Wall Street Journal, and it was talking about how remotes still don't work. And the most expensive remote they quoted, and I think Julie had a post on this on CE Pro, the most expensive remote they reviewed was $200. And that was they had this large article and just talked about how the industry still doesn't work. And everybody who is involved in the industry read it and said, well, that's ridiculous. You don't have to spend, $20,000. You can spend a couple $100 and get something that functions. But no, limiting yourself to $200 makes it tough.
Well, yeah,
I would offer a counterpoint to that, in that the problem isn't necessarily those major publications. The problem is us, because our vendors necessarily aren't. Now, I think it's changing. I think the tide is changing. I think Savant is a perfect example. Savant has looked at a bubble-up marketing approach, which is, rather than saying, yeah, we know our stuff used to cost $10,000 10 years ago, and then it was $5,000, but look, this year it's only $1,000. It's far different than the approach which we're going to. And again, I feel like, I'm constantly kind of going wah, wah, wah about this, is that it's, the $500 remote is the bubble-up point for it. The $1,500 basic control system is coming up, and hopefully, my hope is that we as an industry are getting away from gadgets for that reason, as we start getting more into solutions. And part of it is that, those solutions that are inexpensive in the DIY side of things aren't perfect or optimal, but they're at least something that a consumer is willing to embrace a little bit more from an investment standpoint in the beginning. And that's where, that's kind of the midpoint we're trying to find, which is how do we bridge it so that we can make it affordable and we can make it reliable and robust and go across the way. And I think we're seeing it. I mean, look at Ping, look at Control4, look at Claire Controls, look at Savant. I mean, there's a shift in our industry where we have to focus more on what the rest of the tech industry is doing, which is making it accessible to the masses. Is it going to be perfect? No, but at least it will be evolutionary, as opposed to, we do have a cost of entry still. Yeah. And by saying, well, yeah, it's really, really reliable, well, people might not be able to afford it. I mean, we'd like for them to, but, they got to grow into their system sooner or later, and they're not just going to necessarily make a huge investment sight unseen. No,
and unfortunately, it goes back to the kind of the YouTube effect of what's good enough, and is, that whole barrier to entry. I mean, $500 is an expensive remote. Let's be honest about it. I mean, you go back to the days of the Harmony. First one I ever saw was like probably 10 or 15 years ago, and it was $250, $300, USB, configurable. But that was expensive for that day. Real quickly, as we kind of wrap up here, Julie, I mentioned the fact that our buddy Josh Schrago went to the Target store, or the Target house store in San Francisco. CNET has this house. You remember talking about the Sears house, and I wasn't aware that they had one. But compare that experience, going to the Sears smart home experience, I guess. Compare that to maybe, the CNET, or not the CNET, but the CEDIA experience from a couple weeks ago, or Target's version of that.
Yeah, there's the Target store and the Sears store. They're both their flagship demo homes in Silicon Valley area, or the Bay Area. And they're two very, very different things. Target's is a very conceptual, all kind of plexiglass space with interesting things being lit up across the wall. And so it's very conceptual. You don't buy boxes off the shelf, for example. Sears is a home, and their original point was, well, we install windows, we install garage doors, we install exercise equipment, so let's make this a real house with all the stuff we install. The problem is there's too much stuff. There's so many boxes. There were like 6 different home automation hubs there, and hubs are, you know, people don't buy hubs off the shelf, and you've got these sales associates who, you know, just know a little bit about each product and can't be very helpful. They, you know, I hate to say this, but they really needed to just focus on the devices themselves, the automated garage door opener, the front door camera. I approached it like a regular consumer, and you know, if I would have gone into a space that just had a neat front door camera doorbell thing, I might have bought it off the spot. But then you go inside, and there's their hub, and this links to that, and that doesn't work with that, and this does. Made me just want to go home and, you know, I'll go home and think about it with my spouse and digest all this information. It was too much information. They want to sell stuff right then and there, and it was just too overwhelming.
Yeah. It sounds more like they were trying to use it as a sales piece rather than, you know, hey, here's something cool next time you walk into Sears.
Well, they did that too, but it just became so overwhelming with too many options and little robotics and this and that. It lost its focus. I mean, they put a lot of effort into it, and there's some neat scenarios that you can walk through. You know, the automatic closing of the garage door at the end of the day when you go to bed. So there's some interesting scenarios, but then it just gets too overwhelming. All
right. As we wrap up here, guys, real quickly, Planar released, my favorite topic is OLED just in general. They have a see-through OLED. Does this make any sense for homes at all in any way, shape, or form?
Windows.
Oh,
Windows.
I mean, I saw the Samsung version. We saw it 3 years ago at CES.
Yeah.
JJ? I want to say it was around 3 years ago that they did the first version, which was going to be for kind of like retail point of sale, like for, you know, jewelry boxes or display cases and stuff. That when I saw that, and I saw the applications, you know, there is always, and again, when you're talking about, you know, initially it's going to be for bespoke systems, but you know, you're constantly dealing with the aesthetics of a home. You're constantly dealing with design elements. And just because we're really, really into gadgetry doesn't mean that the rest of the general populace is. But if there's a way to provide the technological perks without making your house look like a stereo store, or, you know, or this Sears house, you know, or anything like that, where you're sitting there going, holy cow, look at all your technology. You're going, wow, this is cool. This is functional. This is a way that, you know, we can use the technology to augment what's going on in our house, to make it more attractive, to you know, streamline things. And so, you know, yeah, when I saw it and I read it, I was like, sweet, okay, there's some cool stuff that could be done with this. But even beyond just the entertainment side, just the informational side of your home, and being able to bring things up, like, you know, I mean, we've been doing it for years with the custom control technology, where we basically have a heads-up display for your house, you know, and if you're looking at all of your critical systems, your energy consumption, your water consumption, you know, weather, email, any of these things, I view it as, yeah, these are ways that you can bridge all of these things together and not have, you know, 5 pieces sitting out there trying to do the job.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, that is going to do it for this edition of our residential show, at least the pilot episode. With us has been Mr. Joe Whitaker. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
How can people get a hold of you if they're interested?
Check out Joe_tech_guru. Sometime I will change that on Twitter. Also, thethoughtfulhome.com. And also check out Cedia.
Yep, absolutely. Cedia.org. Also with us is Julie Jacobson from CE Pro. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you or CE Pro, how do they do so?
CEPro.com. I'm on Twitter at Julie Jacobson. CEPro is CE_pro. And we love to hear from you.
All right, absolutely. Mr. Matt D. Scott from Omega Audio Video. Absolutely. How can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott, or pretty much anywhere using that.
Matt D. Scott or Omega
Easy
Audio
to find.
Video. You are pretty easy to find, scarily so. And last but not least, Mr. Richard Fagoza, thank you, sir.
Where did it go again? There
Right
it is.
If you're watching the video, it's at R. Fragoza.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is really good radio. At R. Fragoza on Twitter. You can also find me occasionally at CE Pro, working for my boss, Julie Jacobson.
Yes.
It just comes from Jules. And let's see, the Facebooks, also here at AVNation at times, you can see when you want to find out about who owns the source code, you might be able to check us on A State of Control, talking about that.
We have spoken about that a couple times. That is one of our...
Once or twice.
Once or twice. I actually got into it today with Mark Coxon and Brock McGinnis about that very subject. So
the coolest name in AV.
Brock McGinnis or Mark Coxon?
Brock, yeah.
Just asking. I mentioned two people. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me, but go by the website. Matt D. Scott spent an awful lot of time making it pretty, so give him some props there. AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. You will find this program, and hopefully you'll find it again as we kind of work out the kinks of it, and many others. Rich mentioned our monthly show, State of Control. We look at control and automation. We have one that focuses on the technology manager side of things, live staging and events, media, social media and marketing, all sorts. And we also have our weekly commercial and pro side of AVWeek. So AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been a special edition of AVWeek.